that they have some sort of magical control over the world, because if you look at their material control over almost everything in their lives, it's a complete and utter failure. I suppose I have been searching long and hard trying to figure out a way that or reasoning behind the idea that Trump himself seems to have this magical following amongst a certain group of people in terms of the not just the QAnons, but the MAGA crowd as well. That there's, why this guy? Why does it have to be that they believe that he's magic? Not just, it seems nonsensical. If you look at any parts of his life, his marriages, his absolute abdication of rearing his own children in any meaningful way, his shunning their childhoods as women's work, his his history of sort of abusive and criminal business practices, his multiple bankruptcies, his casino being pancaked in Atlantic City. And you go, why, oh, why in the world would anyone think that this guy is good at anything? How is it that you could assess based on the material evidence that this guy could run anything, much less the country? And the only answer you can come up with is faith, is a cult-like belief in his abilities that goes beyond reality. That in terms of what the mystery beyond the known has to play a part in his success for these folks if he is to represent their own grievances against the country, the world, their circumstances of their life. So they have to look at him as this messianic character, because there's no real reason why he would be able to solve any of their problems, unless there's, he can, I guess, double your loaves and fishes and walk on water. The illusion that at some point he's going to, and it never seems to stop. Over the last week on my live stream, I have shown many, examples of these, cult-like gatherings, where they're still convinced by every measure, they are still convinced that Trump is going to be president again, that it's not the 5 dates that passed. It's over the next couple of months, and they're really working on a big plan, and it never seems to fade. And they will attach that belief system to literally anything that happens in the news. So we have been watching them, argue that the Suez Canal jam, the boat getting stuck in the Suez Canal, is literally the act of Donald Trump, personally going down there in a tugboat and jamming up this boat that is allegedly full of children that are being shipped to Europe to service the pedivores of Europe. And now one would think that, there's a million reasons why it's insane, but one would think that if you were going to go down there to rescue said children, there would be an immediate follow-up after you jammed the ship and stopped it, of the unloading of those children, instead of, I suppose, leaving them to be baked alive in the desert in a shipping container. All 220,000 tons of children that apparently is just being left to spoil. The idea that he, this is some sort of rescue attempt, and yet the rescue attempt was put in the middle of the desert so that they could just be left there. And then meanwhile, that's Trump solving the human trafficking problem in the world. That is him doing it. He's managed to, in between golf swings and trips to the buffet at Mar-a-Lago, has managed to coordinate this ridiculously poorly played out attack. Like I said, if you're not extracting the children from said ship, if you really believe this, then you basically just, why didn't you rescue them when they got to their destination where they could survive, instead of just getting the boat stuck in the middle of, a waterway surrounded by desert that no one can get to? So obviously madness, right? We know that this is ridiculous, but it has to carry with this this faith, this aspect that they must believe in a miraculous version of Donald Trump, because the personal, real version of the man is pitiful. It can't possibly live up to any of the standards. It's just not. There's no way in anyone's experience that you can go, yeah, he's the guy. That's who's, that's who we need on our side. That's who we need when we're trusting the plan, when we're, you wouldn't let him watch your car, much less enact some sort of magical attack on a shipping system that does nothing but human trafficking. Never mind the fact that those things are probably full of auto parts and IKEA furniture and printers. Never mind that there is that there at some point you have to have a result from any of this, which leads me to the alleged border crisis, a numeric volume of unaccompanied minors and children at the border and people at the border, many of whom can be and will be put back together with their families and deported as part of normal order. But this idea that somehow that Joe Biden rang the dinner bell and that all these migrants are coming across the border because, quote, Biden's a nice guy, and that it has nothing to do with the normal number of people who are coming up because of, violent circumstances in their own country or to escape, famine or drought or floods or, the damage from a hurricane, added to the stack of people who just simply were not processed during the pandemic. They just weren't. They were not. There's a backlog of humanity on the Mexican side of the border who is still going to make an attempt to cross because the Mexican border isn't going to provide them with any support. NGOs over there are basically helping them. And the Mexican government has no impetus to keep them there. They are effectively in a tent city staging area, refugee camp on the other side of the border. And they've been sitting there for a better part of a year. That number of humans mixed with the number of humans who are coming up equals the number that we have. Normal surge plus the backlog. It's not it's a challenge, absolutely, but it's a challenge that's always there. It rises to these numbers about every couple of decades because of extraordinary environmental issues. It will go up because of climate change over the next decade. It's something we're going to have to learn to manage, not just here, but also helping those countries to manage their situation so the people don't have to make the trek in the first place. But I think the one thing that stood out to me in this week of Donald Trump magically stopped a boatload of children in the Suez Canal using his space mind ray or whatever, lined up immediately with this crisis at the border. One would go, well, if these skills were within the realm of possibility with this man, with any possibility as far as his capability, then why would he not use his powers on the border? If that's what he's concerned, if he's really into America first, and he's worried about human trafficking, and he's worried about children, the way they paint this story, why direct all that energy to the Suez Canal and leave in the case of yesterday, a 9-year-old girl to drown in the Rio Grande trying to get across the water? A magical boat with full of auto parts and IKEA furniture somehow is indicative of this masterful skill that Trump still is operating in, which is, obviously, I'm being facetious, of course, because the man has no control over anything anymore. But this is a belief system. This is less about him at this point. This is a belief system that is part of an entire group of not just QAnons, not just the deep-seated maggots, the people who were charging on the 6th, not just them, but the Lindsey Grahams of the world, Jim Jordan posting a picture of Trump with "Miss Me Yet" on it, as if his stacking people at the border on the other side and threatening the Mexican government with tariffs to keep everyone over there was indicative of a policy and not just simply get off my lawn on a global scale. 773-763-9278 is our number. We're going to talk about the voting law that was passed this week in Georgia, whether or not it will stand up to constitutional scrutiny is going to be the ironic part, considering how much the Constitution has played a part in the Republican pushback, and specifically the Trump camp pushback on why there shouldn't have been allowed to oppose emergency measures during an emergency to continue the vote in case of in terms of COVID protocols, which is the one that stood out to them, allowing no excuse absentee voting and the like, which is the reason why Trump got 6 million more votes, but lost because Democrats were able to vote more. There was a flush of votes across the political spectrum because everyone had access, that instead of saying, oh, why don't we really push to make sure our voters can vote absentee, and this actually works, the more voters, and then we can convince a few more people, we might actually have a shot at being a functional party. No, we just need to simply shut down by volume the voting of everyone in our state, because we're going to get swamped at some point. So we'll be back right after this. It's a House Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. All right, now I've got to get to trying to get Johnny audio proper.
Yeah.
And
can you hear me, Hal?
Yeah, I hear you fine. The problem is you're in another window of the, yeah. So
I'm say thingy. I'm ready for it.
Yes, thingy.
I'm in another window of the thingy.
Mm-hmm. For whatever reason,
they hear me on the internet.
Oh yeah, no, you're up on YouTube. All that stuff's fine. It's getting your audio to Chicago is the hard part, because it would create a loop out of that.
Johnny.
Yeah. So what I can do, let's see, is I have to mute Chicago during certain parts of it, and let's see, what goes to Chicago. Co-host. There we go. Because I don't want your audio to come back to you is the hard part. Yeah. So I can't do that. Understand. No, it's okay. I'm working it out. It's just the for whatever reason, CleanFeed just jammed up on the other software. It just won't.
I didn't hear you say CleanFeed. I thought you said Climpy. I'm like, who is that?
Yeah, he's terrible. It's a thing. Hold on. Maybe
for Climpy.
Maybe there's been an update. Maybe that's the issue. But on this next one, the problem is, like I said, I want to get your audio to Chicago, and it's hard. Thank you. So you can hear Chicago, right, Johnny?
No, I don't hear him yet.
Okay. That's not on your end. I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, that's why you had to shush me when I was talking over the intro.
That's right. That's right, because you're on the thing. All right. I'll figure it out. I'm just doing, behind the scenes high math on this. Indeed, let's. So as I try to solve our, whoops, I of course lost audio with that. Yep, that's me losing audio to Chicago. There you go. Hold on 1 second. That's there we go. Hi, sorry, Chicago. I'm back. So as I try to fix audio issues as we roll through, it's a good time. As I'm on the road again, because I'm actually in Alameda, California, doing stand-up for the first time in, out in public. I mean, I've done a couple of shows because of the like Zoom shows-ish shows, the digital-ish shows that I've been, doing in terms of the, helping the Flappers, the comedy club that I like in Burbank, who's needed, help over the last little bit to try and improve, a little bit of financial money running through there so they can pay their staff and the like, and as I'm out and about, I'm seeing more and more people who've been vaccinated. I'm seeing, there's an increase in that. I even did kind of a unofficial poll with the folks in the audience, just asking them like, hey, have you been vaccinated yet? Are you planning to? When's your shot? And people are, in general, and obviously this is a sampling of folks that are in my audience, people who've come to see my show. So it's going to be slanted one direction, right? We're not going to, we're definitely not in a situation where, oh dear, Chicago can't hear me. I hope they can. 1 second. I beg your pardon. Hold on. Chicago, are we there? Can you hear me? I think we're connecting. Good Lord. Hello, check. Chicago, can you hear me? Beg your pardon? Thanks. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why it ditched out like that. Apologies for that. Yeah, it's just being odd that way. I've got to find another fix. Hey, welcome back to the show. Sorry about that. We're dealing with a little bit of audio routing issues as we're out on the road. And I was just discussing that a lot of my, audience that I, informal polling, as it goes out to everybody, everybody seems generally excited about the idea of either having gotten the vaccine in a lot of people's cases, or very excited to get it. And also in the Chris Lavoie kind of world, I'm seeing a lot of folks that are, I guess in many ways, they're getting the vaccine because other people are not. That there is a real push on by right wingers, not just to not get the vaccine, not just to avoid the vaccine itself, but to literally stop the vaccine from being administered. Now, in California and other states, there have been reports of people intentionally making appointments and not showing up so as to spoil the batches that are there. There was a man who stopped a convoy of National Guard trucks that were carrying vaccine at gunpoint, basically heard that they were transporting vaccine at a gas station, got in his car, followed them, took out a gun, stopped the trucks. And when he was arrested, it was, I guess his story was, he believed that a woman and a child had been kidnapped and were in the trucks. That I don't know if he believes that that's how the vaccine is made, that there's a woman and a child just hooked up to some sort of weird contraption, and I guess we're getting the vaccine out of them like the Skeksis, in the Dark Crystal, just draining their life force from them, or in some sort of weird adrenochrome fantasy that this guy has. But it's not uncommon to this crowd. It is incredibly difficult to overstate the danger and damage of the anti-vaxxer crowd. Many of the QAnon folks, many of the hardcore, they're coming to destroy our country. The socialists and the communists are going to wreck our country. All that stuff. Those folks are now transmuting into effectively an anti-vax fighting force. That it isn't simply enough to not get yourself vaccinated. It is crucial that, and I'm looking up this National Guard article about this guy, but he's indicative of a greater movement. The guy who pulled over the National Guard, and there is an increasing. There's a group called the Disinfo Dozen that has started, that is being targeted by people who are trying to make sure that the anti-vaxxer movement doesn't result in a lot of people not getting inoculated during this. And the irony that you have Donald Trump on the one hand claiming that the vaccine is completely him, he created it, as if he was in the lab the entire time, and that without him being in office, it would have taken 5 to 10 years, if ever. He's said this many times, if ever, to come up with this vaccine, right? And in this process, he singularly is responsible for this vaccine happening and how good it is. Meanwhile, if you poll people almost to the person, it is Trump supporters, beyond even just Republicans. The most hardcore Trump supporters are the biggest group refusing to get the vaccine or believing it is some sort of plot or cult thing or, satanic cabal story that they're pushing. And it's horrifying that we are right now seeing a spike in cases, many of which are related to spring break a week and a half ago and the beginning of it, and the cases that carry forward as people went for a short time and came home, like Matt Getz's quote unquote son, Nestor, who he allowed to have a short spring break amongst the crowd and then come home, which would seemingly, considering 2 weeks of quarantine are kind of minimal for exposure, seems the exact opposite of the kind of plan that you would want to put forward, one would think. But in the process, we are seeing a rise in case rates again. Now, death rates continue to go down as treatments and the ability to vaccinate people and techniques to keep people alive continue to expand. But we're looking down the barrel of 50 to 60,000 Americans dead by July from this, simply because there is quote unquote pandemic fatigue amongst a large swath of the populace, where the Republicans never were on board anyways. And then people who have been for the better part of a year getting it together. And as people increasingly go out who have been vaccinated and go, well, I've been vaccinated, so I'm not going to wear my mask. And many people who have been vaccinated are continuing to mask up as a, as Rand Paul would call it, as theater, but as a, on two fronts. One is, of course, because they want to set an example for other people, so that, because you can't know that I really had the vaccine or know if I'm being honest about it. And so until we get enough people vaccinated, it's best that everybody wear their masks. So if half people are walking around, people are like, I guess we're not wearing masks anymore, and they'll start taking the masks off whether they've been vaccinated, because they're not going to have a conversation with you. So better to wear your mask. Plus, you could be in that 6 to 4% that even though you are effectively protected from the disease, could be an asymptomatic carrier. What might have killed you has now made you simply a rail car for the spread of a pathogen. And the idea of having someone else's death on you because there's a 4 to 6% chance that you could carry this disease, while it might not hurt you, but you bumbling around spread it to 6 or 10 other people, 2 of whom it could kill, is not something most people relish as a thought. So again, people wearing masks for the time being. But there is a response. There is an emotional response to this that we have to take into account when we're discussing this, because that's how most people are reacting to it. And also, the same thing is true of the border crisis. That one of the reasons why the border crisis is eating up as much of our news feed as it is because we are seeing women and children coming across the border who are fleeing violence and drought and hurricanes and the like. We have to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Marks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. All right, I'm going to try and hook up, Chicago, I'm going to try and hook up with you again real quick. On the other source, so I'll be off for a second, and then I'll be back. Okay, there we go. And then it worked last time. I don't know why it's being weird this time, but maybe it just has to.
I don't mind just sitting here looking pretty.
I understand. I'd like for you to be able to speak, which would be good. It's just I don't know why the audio from this is. Let's see. Why to check. Yeah, I don't know what the heck is with it. Use my allowed. Okay. Page for, okay. Let's see, reload the page. Start. Check. Chicago. Allow. There we go. Check one. God damn it.
Check one.
Check. No, it's not you.
Check my booty.
Damn it. Okay.
Check my booty.
That is so wrong. All right. So one more
check.
second. It's not you. It's for some reason, Clean Feed's being a big jerk today. And that's how we get audio to Chicago. So unfortunately, okay, Chicago, we're back. Sorry about that. Just checking. They're going to connect Chicago. And then how do I get your audio in there without a terrible loop?
Loop.
That's the hard part. Other than, of course, muting Chicago during, I think I can do this. Okay, so Chicago, there we go. Okay, and so Johnny, say something?
Check a minute too.
Oh my gosh, and you're very loud on their end. That's fun. So so Chicago, there's going to be, I'll have to mute you during the segments, and that way there will be a loop back. I can get your audio. Your audio is now going to Chicago. Yeah, but I'm gonna have to manually loop the.
So if there's a call, I can just mute myself.
Yes, I think we'll just avoid that for today, for the most part. So, yeah. I've been trying to figure this thing out all morning before we got on the air, and I was like, I figured it would start working. Great. And it doesn't seem like you're going, there wasn't a loop there. I didn't do anything. Oh, it's got echo cancel. Oh, yes. Echo cancel works.
Okay.
Derp. It's okay.
I kind of wanted to talk about
welcome back to the show. And Johnny Million is with us, and we've got audio. It actually works. I can actually, Chicago can hear you. Gosh, it's such. I'm just gonna. You can talk for a segment. I'm just gonna kick back for a second after all the tech stuff that I've been doing in the back.
You carried the torch for a while, and
and
something I wanted to talk about was the now I'm like watching myself talk, which is always weird to me. The Trump coming out and saying that the people storming the Capitol on January 6th were no threat.
None.
And were hugging the police.
Hugging and kissing
the police. And it's a case of they can't stick to a story. I'm a well-known liar. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and pretty much what I do is lie. And one thing that I've learned is that it's really hard to stick to a story.
Sure.
And is the story that it was Antifa dressing up as Trump lovers and going there and raising hell? Or were they actually adorable Trump lovers just going there and hugging and kissing? You can't have it both ways.
No, you can't. And the hard part too is that even some of the Trump supporters have been very upset that Antifa is getting credit for what they're doing. And now I'm sure he's triggering some sort of homophobic panic in a lot of them, that they were allegedly hugging and kissing
we can only hope.
Uniformed police officers. You know what I mean? Like it was a meet and greet line at the Village People or something. I'm sure that they're just freaking out that I wasn't there to hug and kiss them. They're jackbooted thugs, and they are, they I guess represent. Yes, right. The people who stormed it. But I mean, the people who they view the police as some sort of weird UN strike force, which is, not surprising that they would believe this.
Right.
Again, this attributes to the magical part of it. What's easier to get through your head or emotionally deal with. The fact that you and a bunch of your dumb friends stormed the Capitol and attacked police officers on a day when we are literally working through, the normal functions of government, or which means you have to reflect on your own behavior and judge yourself accordingly, or that those aren't really cops, they're UN shock troops that have been put there by the deep state to, and that what was going on inside the Capitol was not the normal order of business, but in fact, the giant theft of America by forces, foreign and domestic, that you and your buddies need to stop. You're just being extra American-y when you're storming out there. That's, which is easier for you to, emotionally project as far as your image of yourself. That's the difficult part. And that's where a lot of them are. And again, they have to believe in the magic of Donald Trump and the mystery of the deep state, because it, quite frankly, takes away any responsibility for knowing any real details. And of course I can't know. It's part of the, it's 5D chess that Trump is playing, and the deep state is even deeper than we knew. It couldn't be that you are just a gullible moron, and that you allowed yourself, because of your own, sexism and racism and bias about, your beliefs about the left or the right, as far as the purity of the right and the villainy of the left, that you've been bought, you bought into for, decades, because at first you were being sold that by maybe right-leaning family members and the like, and it just got worse as we got a black president, and as obviously George W. Bush and Dick Cheney aren't, as the administration responsible for getting us into the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Clearly, the deep state, a darker mechanism. It could not be human failings that got us into this situation. It has to be that the Illuminati is running stuff, because then you would have to go, oh, okay, so under Clinton, we didn't go into Rwanda, and we should have, and he regrets it. But under Bush, we went into Afghanistan and Iraq, and everybody regrets it. And then they wrecked the economy. And it couldn't be that, Obama's rescue package that he initially presented would have helped heal the country faster and improve the economy faster and actually make the recovery faster overall. It couldn't be that. It had to be that they were trying to destroy America, and they were just using this crisis to do it. And yet another one, yet another one, yet another. And then it couldn't be that Donald Trump is a failed businessman who exemplifies the Peter principle on almost every standard, where he literally fails upward because of the outsized strength of the New York financial and real estate markets over the United States. The fact that gives him some sort of magical leg up in terms of his ability to run for president in the first place, much less win, over, an Arkansas governor who became president for 8 years, his wife who spearheaded S-chip, and got the largest child insurance program in American history passed, basically as her, and they've hated her for it ever since, that ran and became a senator, was Secretary of State, and then ran for president and was qualified. It could not be that. It has to be that Donald Trump is magic, and there's a giant demonic organization behind the scenes that is running everything. And on.
One thing that helped my mood about it was that when I saw the headline, I think I was just looking at a news aggregator like Google News, and the headline from CNN just said, Trump lies about insurrection on January 6th.
Right.
Rather than playing that weird middle card.
Yeah. Manipulated statements, make Trump tend to express distrust with narrative around January 6th. Right. Yeah, that kind of manipulated speak. But that is, the more that happens, by the way, you would view that as something helpful. Like, finally, we're addressing this for what it is. It is an absolute lie.
Yep.
This is clearly him lying. He knows better. It's beyond even just him being wrong or making assumptions or thinking, well, my supporters can't be all bad. They're lovely people. So maybe they didn't mean this. And I have a feeling, no, just flat out, he saw the video. He was gleefully watching the attacks. He was watching them break windows. He knows that police were assaulted. There is literally an FBI warrant out for a maskless MAGA assaulter who gouged out the eye of a police officer. The ribs cracked, spinal columns damaged, beyond Officer Sicknick dying, the suicides, the one cop who had the thank you but F you for being there cop that had a heart attack after being tased with his own taser by people carrying Blue Lives Matter flags. Trump saw all that. He didn't miss it. He wasn't confused on the day. He was gleefully watching it. He was very impressed at the impact that he had. He was having, like every other cult leader has, I suppose, an endorphin rush.
Sure.
At watching,
what a blast that must have been.
Yeah, like watching everybody just, doing that for him. And even, there has to be a touch of just amazed, because at the same time you're watching it happen, you aren't worth it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Does
Trump have imposter syndrome?
Oh, clearly. Yeah. That's always been my argument about his alleged narcissism, is that it is absolutely rooted in an awareness that he has no qualifications for any of the situations he's in. And the only area where he has legitimate confidence that's based on experience is where he has been rich and the women he can get from being rich, right? That informs a lot of his behavior, not because he deserves it. As a matter of fact, like I've said before, there's an element of Trump's psyche that winning in court because you're right in terms of the case is not special. Anybody can do that. Anybody can prevail in court when you deserve to prevail in court. But if you can cheat your way through, that means you're really smart. If you were able to game the system and get away with it, and time again, because of the protections of the New York real estate market that I've talked breathlessly about over the years, he has come under the illusion that somehow he has some sort of skill or value because of that, and not that they value the New York real estate market and the New York financial world more than they care about going after a lump like Donald Trump. And this crowd that is still all on board. For all the idea that Q and all these other crowds have been broomed from the internet. In all honesty, we are seeing, one need only go on and look up the word prophecy and Trump on YouTube, and you will have your feed filled with lunatics who say that, he's going to walk across the pond, the water traps at Mar-a-Lago to prove his messianic ability. And, and that there's 2 Air Force Ones and 2 Air Force Twos flying in the air all the time. And it's not because, 6 weeks ago in the transition, somebody in a air traffic control tower was late transferring the code after, because once the vice president steps off of Air Force 2, it no longer becomes Air Force 2. It's only Air Force 2 when you're on it. It's not the plane. It's the plane that carries the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody doesn't immediately tap out, okay, she's off, and the plane takes off again in the air. Oh my God, why is there a Air Force 2 is flying when she's there? There must be 2 vice presidents, right? That's the storyline. Not, again, the Occam's razor of normal bureaucracy and somebody forgetting to flip a switch for about 15 minutes. But it must be that there is a giant conspiracy going on. And this isn't an accident, by the way. For all the Russian interference stuff that we've heard about over the last little bit, and we got to take a break, but we'll be back right after this. With all the stories about, Russian interference in our elections and our democracy, the seeds of that undermining are planted in the conspiratorial world and in the anti-vaccine world. That, look at the number of groups online that started out relatively innocuously and then immediately got a flood of support of, oh yeah, I'm just like you, from these knockoff accounts from Macedonia paid for by the Internet Research Agency that the Russians put up and that the Saudis put up and that the Chinese put up to create this kind of dissemination and this division, because that's how you make a democracy fall apart. And you can't just come out and go that the Republicans are the problem, the Democrats are the problem. You have to see these crazy, deep-seated conspiratorial ideas in every little corner so that people meet at the grocery store and go, oh yeah, me too. We'll be back right after this. Okay. I'm just impressed at the amount of wiring internally, computer-wise. I was able to pull off and get audio going, while still running all my stuff. It's been a while since I've had to do that. I'm getting a little comfortable with how my setup is when I'm at home. Right. And hi, chat room. Sorry, I haven't been able to talk to you guys as much as I would like. Hello and everybody. Let me see if I'll add that in so we can say hi to you guys directly. And I can, because it is just hello. Hi everybody. Thanks so much. Good to see you. And everybody saying hi to your cat.
Yep.
Hey Nat, how are you? We're all getting comfortable with our home stuff these days. I have an account on what is this, on Russian Facebook that what? Seemed to do disinfo. I was going back and forth. Someone said they were in Russia and they answered in Russian. Yeah, what they do is, yes, I am black guy living in Wisconsin. I feel exactly like you do. There's so much of that stuff online. Okay, I found the article I was looking for. That's the hard part. I'm trying to fix all this stuff, and I'm I just want to bring up this article. What's the best version of it? Thank you. Cron. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the guy, by the way, he looks like, talk about the redneck Taliban, Johnny. So there's this fella named Larry Harris, and in Arizona, and he was at a gas station, and he apparently he overheard some National Guardsmen at a gas station and heard that they were transporting COVID vaccine, and he basically, after multiple attempts to run them off the road, blocked the road and pulled a gun on 11 National Guard members. A group of National Guardsmen are safe after a dangerous encounter with an armed man on a highway in West Texas, according to KCBD staff and WAFB 9. Larry Harris of Arizona was arrested Monday after allegedly following a caravan of National Guardsmen en route to Matador, Texas, to deliver a shipment of COVID-19 vaccines. Harris is accused of cutting their vehicles off and pulling a loaded gun on the unarmed officers. 3 vehicles carrying 11 National Guardsmen were traveling along Highway 6882 and outside Lubbock, Texas, when Harris is said to have attempted to force the vans from the road. According to the police, Harris veered into oncoming traffic and forced the vans to stop. He then allegedly pointed his gun, a loaded Colt 1911 pistol with 45 caliber bullets, at the unarmed guardsman and told them he was a detective. Narrator: he's not a detective. And Harris later told officers he had followed the guardsmen, who were in full uniform, from a Love's Travel station in Lubbock because he believed they had kidnapped a woman and child. Idalou officers arrived at the scene to find Harris among the guardsmen with his gun. He had been taken into custody without further incident. Harris now faces charges for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, unlawful restraint, unlawful carrying of a weapon, impersonating a public servant because he was not a detective, and interference with Texas military forces. Idlewild Police Chief Eric Williams questioned whether mental illness contributed to the dangerous incident. Not in the traditional sense, but they said Mr. Harris appears to be mentally disturbed. This was a very dangerous situation since the suspect was standing in the midst of the unarmed guardsman with a loaded weapon. This is just Texas's recent example of dangerous mistaken identity involving firearms, seemingly conspiracy-minded paranoia. Last October, a former Houston police captain pulled a gun on a repairman he believed was driving around a truck full of uncounted votes that had been cast for then-President Donald Trump. The repairman's vehicle contained nothing but air conditioning parts, and the former captain, Mark Anthony Aguirre, 63, was arrested after the attack and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I know the story around the border is going to eat up a lot of the press bandwidth, but the reality is, again, this is an ongoing long-term problem that will require long-term solutions. It will require real legislation, and by the way, the National Guard soldiers who were transporting these things were unarmed. So just to be clear, he wasn't carrying he was pulling a weapon on unarmed Guard servicemen and women. There were men and women in those trucks that were simply there just doing shipping. These weren't soldiers per se, nor would there, in any sane world, would there, in deference to what the officer said about this gentleman, there would be no reason for people shipping vaccines to have to be armed in the United States of America. I mean, I think it's important to focus on that for 1 second. Imagine for a second that in the United States of America, to transport vaccines, you would have to carry a gun to protect yourself from the former president's supporters. That in and of itself, I mean, if you're talking about mental illness playing, baby. Yeah. So over the, we have watched on and on as the Republican Party has kind of dovetailed behind Donald Trump, and over the course of his ire with Fox News and with simply normal, thoughtful Republican voices who are, while I disagree with them vehemently on policy, are not, for all practical purposes, lunatics. His ire and sort of verbal violence towards those folks has never ebbed. It is always, it's an ongoing attack, and in many ways has resulted in an all but fully effective purge of any normal conservative behavior in the Republican Party. Because and this is one of the things that struck me over the last week, and that we're talking about the reform of the filibuster in terms of getting HR 1 passed, for example, and gun legislation. And as people have talked about this, Joe Manchin is getting a lot of attention, and rightly so, about his hold up on a few things or whatever. But he's in a situation where, from a Democratic standpoint, he believes in 60 to 80% of any of the given bills he's talking about. He's just got issues either in his state with 20% of them, let's say. And in the normal order of business in governing, a fellow Democrat having 20% issues with a particular bill would result in compromise on the actual bill and it going forward. And you'd get the majority of what's in there, because they've got to get reelected in their state. And that there would be kind of fold over in bipartisanship in theory, as these bills that we're talking about, HR 1, comprehensive background checks and the like, are incredibly popular amongst the American people, including Republicans. But the conversation, because of the singular aspect of Joe Manchin as an individual, is way easier for the media to have, and the infighting that supposedly that creates within the Democratic Party about this, than the fact that lock, stock, and barrel, no pun intended, the entirety of the Republican Party, whether they believe in the bill or not, is in direct opposition. For all the wailing and gnashing of teeth of Collins and Murkowski and Mitt Romney, or even Kinzinger, all these people who are supposed to be these kind of moderating voices, even with their input, none of them are voting for any of these bills. In the case of Joe Manchin, and like I said, whatever issues I may have with him, you're talking about someone who is at least on principle going, these are the changes I would like to see. This is because of my constituents, and this is the kind of vote I could give. And it's a normal process in terms of whether you agree or disagree with the elements of the bill that he wants struck. It's a normal process of democracy, because the West Virginia voters and at least in his polling and what will get him reelected and make sure he stays in there and make sure that a Republican doesn't take that seat, because it's on the edge there, is much harder to navigate than, say, an upstate New York or a Napa Valley district, or being the senator of a rock solid blue state like California, Washington State or New York. So there's a political fine line to walk, getting, and in those situations, if you make those concessions, or you find some balancing act where, like, we'll give you a little of this, you give us a little of that, and then you finally come up with a bill just like you would do in any committee setting, you'll end up getting Joe Manchin's vote. The difference is, and why this isn't more of the conversation, I find shocking, but there is no point where any of these Republicans, even if they wholesale got 50-50 of these bills, if they were able to amend half the bill out of existence, they're still not going to vote for it. And to me, that's more of a news story than someone going, if I do this whole bill as it's written, I'm not getting reelected, and I'm not going to lose my seat voting for something that I know will get me replaced by somebody who's never going to vote for any of it. That kind of argument. That's a reasonable fear and argument to have. Again, whatever you believe about those pieces, he's not the only person who has those kind of conversations. He's just the only one we're fixating on. But by fixating on it, especially in the news, what we are, for some reason, shrugging off is the idea that we are suddenly to accept and expect the idea that all Republicans, no matter how much input they have on a bill, no matter how much they posture about believing in things like background checks, or they want election integrity and those kind of things, are never, not ever, no matter what their supposed place on the political spectrum within the Republican Party, some sort of moderating voice or some sort of centrist Republican, all of them are going to vote just like Josh Hawley. All of them are voting just like Ted Cruz. All of them are voting with Jim Jordan. And that is a much bigger story, which is, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the infrastructure bill that Biden has presented, and how much it benefits all these states, and why this is a fight everybody thinks it's a losing battle, and this is not one of those areas where you can get bipartisanship and people sign on. The Republicans are begging Democrats to do an infrastructure spending bill using reconciliation so they can vote against it, lock, stock, and barrel, and then pat themselves on the back next to people sticking shovels in the ground in their own states. We'll be back. And we got to talk about Dominion suing Fox News too.
Yes, I love that.
1.6 billion, smaller than the Smartmatic one.
Yeah.
Although Dominion might be able to, they're still going to maintain some contracts in a lot of states or whatever. Smartmatic's entire business model is destroyed. So basically, what they're looking for is seed money to start a new company, because they're going to have to start from scratch.
Sure.
And hi, chat room. Hi.
You talk to the chat room. I've got to go get a snack.
Okay. Yogurt?
Probably. I'll come and eat it on camera.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. No problem. See you in a second. Hi, chat room. Sorry about the madness of trying to get the audio working. I don't know why there's this looping problem right now with the software. I'm going to have to remedy it or I'm going to have to start bringing a second computer or a mixing board on the road with me, which I don't look forward to. Yeah. So, yes. And don't forget to give a thumbs up. Thanks, Ziggy. Yes. Share, like, and subscribe. Appreciate that so much. Just do it. Oh. What's your opinion on the Republican health? Sorry, I got to roll that back to what's. Let's see. This question. There we go. How I research a lot of Democratic policies are not all perfect. What I choose far better than the option the Republican ones that claim to have. Okay, guys. So on here, let's go right here. It would suck. Carrying that much stuff with me is sort of ridiculous. Yogurt does sound good. I agree. Let's see. I'm gonna grab this. Let's see. I agree on the infrastructure bill. Yeah, I will be shocked in many ways. And in quotes, obviously, about the number of people who will be, patting themselves on the back. Any chance stream for how will be fixed? Speaking of remedies, any chance stream for how will be fixed? I don't know what that means. How it's a beautiful day in the Bay for you. Gorgeous day. Get out and enjoy it. I will try at some point, I think. Although more than likely, because I have 2 shows tonight, I will finish the show, chat with you guys for a bit, and then go collapse. So let's see. And we'll go. You need to come here to San Diego and do a show. I agree. We will get there at some point. It's slowly but surely. Places are opening up. We need the fairness doctrine back. That, it's interesting that we keep hearing that argument from Republicans again. Yeah, by the way, Mark Savard still has his free hypnosis thing, where if you want a stress relief thing, you can, thanks for posting that, CSL. If you go to that website, marksavard.com, and you send him an email at info@marksavard.com, with Hal said I'm stressed, he'll send you this free self-stress. Okay, cool. Self-hypnosis thing. So hold on. Johnny's back with us. There he is. Hi, Johnny. I'll wait till you sit down. I think that's only we're back. We're back
Hi.
in 20. Hi, we're back in 20. So coming back. Hey, yep. Chobani, na.
I will even be intentionally not gross.
And by the way, the intro music is playing. I know you can't hear it, but that's a loop issue. So with all the wailing and gnashing of teeth that we've obviously heard about because of the border crisis / challenge / normal order of business, along with that, we did have a couple of big chunks of good news that, on the one hand, that Biden is introducing what is effectively this $3 trillion infrastructure plan, which again, when they first initiated it and the price tag came out that everybody's talking about, and they are all mentioning this in the news. They're calling it the $3 trillion, infrastructure bill or plan. The reality is it's about 1.6 to 1.8 trillion for direct infrastructure, 1.2 to 4% for universal pre-K, those kind of things, which involves, by the way, facilities. It involves, government spending in part, but not all of it. So some of it, qualifies as material infrastructure. Other parts are just kind of like the business infrastructure of the country as a whole. So, so as people are talking about the $3 trillion infrastructure bill, I would remind you as you hear about it, and you will continue to hear about it as it's floated, that more than likely what will actually be voted out of committee or presented will be a $1.6 to $1.8 trillion direct stimulus package, and that the $3 trillion is the first floated one in an attempt to overshoot to dial certain things back in the deal-making process. And if you will recall, as many of us do, that the complaints about the Obama administration, and indeed, the Clinton era for that matter, was that Democrats, and by the way, Republicans feel the exact same way about their side as well, but Democrats feel that why do we always, if we need $500 billion, why do we start there with negotiations? Why don't we start at $1.1 million? Because we know they're going to cut it in half. Because we start at 500, we're going to end up with 250. And that's why are we going to learn that lesson? Well, for the record, Biden started with 1.9 trillion on his American Rescue Plan, and he got 1.9 trillion. They are going to present an infrastructure bill that is $3 trillion. And if at some point, if they don't manage to get all 3 trillion, which is a distinct possibility, because, by the way, again, like I said, this particular thing, this is unlike healthcare, where you've got the Darwinistic neo-Christian cull the herd crowd who don't believe we should have healthcare, not because it's socialism or whatever, but because if we keep saving everyone, we'll be overcrowded with useless eaters. That kind of side of the argument. That unlike that, infrastructure has something for everybody. Yep. Everybody uses roads.
And jobs.
That's right. Everybody uses roads. Everybody uses airports. The fact that Biden said we could take all these workers that lost their jobs because of the Keystone Pipeline, which was basically just a vein waiting to burst toxins into our aquifers across the country, so we can carry Canadian shale oil to our Gulf to pay market for it, whatever. That all those people could be paid to cap wells that are leaking methane and meet our climate goals. And he's like, we got like 100,000, uncapped wells leaking methane. Did you ever hear Trump say anything remotely as detailed as that? I'm honest to God, for all the thing that like Biden was checking notes, he didn't check notes on that one. That was just off the top of his head. And fact check true. But it's one thing to pull a detail out of your head. It's another thing that when it's factually correct and would provide jobs and would improve the environment. None of which, by the way, and beyond climate change, you don't have to believe in climate change to know that methane is dangerous. That it is, yes, right. That it is toxic, and especially when Johnny Millions had too much yogurt. And yes. It is toxic. Yes, it's toxic. And ask anybody who works for around big agribusiness where they have these giant ponds of pig excrement that have a giant tarp over the top of them that inflates like a Jiffy Pop full of methane, and it's somebody's job to go out and shoot it with a projectile.
Up for right now,
I don't know, but but just to release the methane that builds up in these giant ponds of pig crap. You don't have to teach people in red states about the dangers of methane. You don't. It's very easy to understand. The other thing is, and I was very proud. Apparently, my clamoring about rural broadband and a nationwide broadband infrastructure thing made it past the normal interrupters, and I literally got an email where somebody said, by the way, your prioritization of rural broadband as an argument gained some ground around the administration circles, and they're talking about it more. And I'm like, yeah, because it was genius when he brought it up. And if you carry that forward, if that's your primary push, that is also in the Zoom world that we've all been through this, where the internet in certain places is just lame. It's just, across the flyover states, which always complain about their flyover status, there's no fiber optic. And the best internet you're going to get is satellite, which is not actually functionally satellite. They use the Google balloons, but it might as well be the same system they use to get internet up over, sub-Saharan Africa and impoverished areas, just so aid workers can communicate to fight AIDS and malaria. It's the same system, and it's a shame. It's embarrassing. And if you put that forward, that a huge part of this, this infrastructure package is for rural broadband and a smart grid. And if Texas wants to opt out of that, then what they're going to see,
that'd be so perfect.
Yes, it would. And you're going to see a stampede of voters. Now, here's the other part. Right now, if you want to be in business, either in terms of the stock market, or you want to be in terms of as far as trading, financial markets, if you want to run a real estate business or any of those, you have to be in that real estate market. If you want to, coordinate any of these things, you got to be physically there. Largely because while you absolutely could, in theory, be able to connect via the internet from anywhere in the country, the quality and speed of it varies drastically. And the reliability of it, more than anything else, while you can deal with slow internet if you know that that's what's to be expected every day, the intermittent nature of internet is the thing that's affected people the most. And during the pandemic, because of remote learning and people conducting business remotely, the need for high quality internet everywhere in the country has spiked. It used to just be you needed it in Silicon Valley, you needed it in Washington state around Seattle, you needed it in California around the big cities, and you needed it in New York for the financial markets, and New Jersey for shipping and all those kind of things, and Chicago for trading and media. But beyond that, it was really just for streaming and watching TV shows, and that's it. Well, as the quality of the streaming has gone up, and as people's expectations has gone up, so has the demand. And the desire for nationwide broadband, especially rural broadband, where you're guaranteed this, does two things. One is it provides Americans with an equal service, not based on just the geography of something, especially since the internet was originally a government creation. It was the intranet. The DoD used it. They came up with a new system that was better and faster. And so they turned over the old system to the public to use for whatever it was. And the internet was born out of that. A huge turning point in human history, no question. But while, Washington State and California and New York and Florida and Texas and to some degree Illinois and other states have upgraded the quality of that, many states have been left behind to basically be using the same infrastructure that was there when the DoD turned it over in 1991. And if you made a big push to just lay fiber optic across this country, you have twofold. One is you allow for the education and the business opportunities for people in the flyover states, so they don't feel as left out in those regards. So you can kind of bring them back into the emotional fold of being, involved in the rest of America instead of an us versus them thing. And then the other aspect of it is you have a lot of people who live in California, New York, all these big population areas that would love to live out someplace with a farm and a little bit of land, have some space, that kind of stuff, but can't move their business because of the quality of the internet and how much they use it for business, which is what keeps those states red, largely. because the blue, like the productive blue, city citizens, which keep the economy afloat largely, have to be in those places, have to geographically locate to those places to have the business that they want.
Yep.
You create a nationwide near, fiber optic or near fiber optic quality broadband infrastructure that goes through rural and urban areas alike. You create a shift in the demographic of states in terms of the future of the electorate over time, over 10 to 12 years. You will see a shift in red states turning purple in those regards because of the volume of people who will move in there. That, you move 100,000 people, to Idaho or Montana, from Washington State, because they can now work out of there at the same quality and own a ranch as well. You're going to see a major shift in the voting in those states. So it is this is I think it's a winner. And I think it is, primarily in the push for the infrastructure package. If that's the leading edge, if that's the tip of the spear of the push for this infrastructure bill, they will find a groundswell of support for it nationwide. Because again, you will have the kids of these state senators in these red states, the children and the sons and daughters and family members of these representatives and these senators in these states saying, yeah, we need real internet here, Dad. We need real internet here, Mom.
Yeah, Dad.
Yeah, Dad. So we got to take a break. When we come back, I do want to talk about the Fox Dominion lawsuit. Oh, joy, oh, rapture. This is the Housemarks radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I'm trolling some people in our chat.
Nice. What?
Maureen asked a genuine question about what is methane's use in nature, and I just think comedy.
That's so wrong.
Oh, but I'm right.
Right. Yeah. Well, obviously, it's a warning to other animals. Back off.
And you don't have your soundboard today.
No. Well, I do, but in many ways, I dare not mess around with the routing of the audio on it without throwing a monkey wrench into the system. So I can, let's see, if I put it where, see if I put it up here, right there. You mean?
Yay!
That guy? Yeah. Whoops, sorry.
Captain's log.
All right.
Captain's log.
There you go.
Is that Captain's log all one sound?
No.
Captain's log.
I do that whenever we talk about the Operation Fart Steed.
Captain's log.
Here, I'm sending you the Dominion article that I'm looking at right now, just so you know, so we're on the same page.
Sending it to text?
Yes. Yes.
All right, I'll pull it up on my old iPad.
All right. I'm not sorry. It sounds like a great idea.
Captain's log.
All right. Sorry. Right.
I was thinking of the immortal words of Socrates, who said, I drank what?
So over the course of the last few months, we have watched the fall of Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, the entire narrative of the election was stolen, but for a few didn't.
I haven't thought about Rudy Giuliani in like a month.
I'm sorry to interrupt that streak. That was a good streak you had going there, and I blew it.
Yeah.
Well, Rudy, has been named in one of these $1 billion lawsuits, along with Sidney Powell, whose argument, in terms of why she tried to get it dismissed this week. She tried to get it was a Kraken dismissal. She tried to get it dismissed under the pretense that no one would take her seriously. That no one should have. No one should
defense.
Right. I mean, well, Tucker. I think it was Tucker who used that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
I'm not real news, so no one would believe I'm real news. So why should I? How should I be in trouble for this? Well, this week, and by the way, Smartmatic and Dominion both gave Fox a chance. They gave everybody an exit strategy. A few months ago, if you'll recall, they presented all these folks with a disclaimer to walk back what you said. Like, you take back what you said about our company and air somebody saying there's no proof because there isn't.
Didn't Newsmax do it?
Yeah, Newsmax. And the chief editor of Newsmax, the guy walked out on Mike Lindell because of this. He got up and left the interview because he didn't want to be in the clip where Mike Lindell got them even in deeper hot water. He needed that guy for all the, oh my God, it was hilarious that Newsmax's editor-in-chief or whatever got up and wandered out of a Mike Lindell clip. The reason he did that was material and legal, which was to show in court, if they were brought back in, that not only did he push back against it, he literally left. Right? And that the next time Mike Lindell was on, they made him they edited the piece. It wasn't live.
Yeah, they interrupted him and read that disclaimer on top of what he was trying to say.
Mm-hmm. So if you'll recall, Maria Bartiromo, who has been she has done more to attack election integrity in this country than any other person on Fox News. And therefore, because Fox News has the biggest reach of any of these, beyond Newsmax, beyond OAN, as much as attention as they've gotten by the 200% increase in viewership, when you consider that next to nobody was watching, that's not that, going from 1 to 200 people is not that big a deal. It's yes, they beat, one 7 o'clock slot on Fox, which next to nobody watches because that's the gap in viewership between the daytime and before, Hannity and Tucker and that stuff starts, Laura and whatnot. So Greg Kelly was beating one of those slots at one point during part of the day, and it was big news. But Fox News is, for all practical purposes, not of course because of content, but because of reach, is one of the big 5 networks in terms of news. Always has been. It's now they've lost to MSNBC and CNN for the first time since 2000 in the last 3 months, and it's getting bad. And they've tried to get some of it back by being a little more Newsmaxy in their programming to try and draw that audience back. And it has worked because Newsmax's viewership has plummeted by 50% in the last month. And when you're going up from a tiny number, going up 200% is great. When you hit a nice high, dropping by 50 sucks. It's terrible. Yeah. So, but during this time, so Maria Bartiromo was doing segment after segment with Rudy Giuliani and others on there and about, the Dominion machines. And she wouldn't shut up about it at a certain point, even when Fox was getting, pushback from Dominion. And they got this video that specifically said, you got to air it during these shows because these are the shows that talked about it. And you got to run it in the morning, like during Fox and Friends. So people on your network see it, you got a responsibility. So they shot this video of this guy who's just like a reporter for Fox News, but it was a pre-cut piece that they basically rolled. And Maria Bartiromo put at the end of one of her episodes and just went, now we got to play this thing, basically. And it ran, and then she went, so there's that. And then that was the end of the show. Basically just lip service. Basically just, burying it, wink and a nod that it's garbage and that, we have to play this for legal reasons. But you and I both know what's really going on here, that kind of thing. Well, over the course of the last 6 weeks or so, apparently Dominion has recognized that not only was that just lip service, that they did not have a segment equal to the amount of times they lied about Dominion going forward, but they were continuing to push these ideas. So they name dropped Dominion all along. And then they keep pushing this idea that votes were fabricated, machines were, vote tallies were changed and stuff. And the idea is that, well, if we just don't say the name anymore, wink, wink, but we only talk about the states, wink, wink, that we were talking about initially, wink, wink, then we can legally stay out of jeopardy in this regard. Well, apparently that didn't work, because this week, Dominion Voting Machines filed a $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit against Fox News on Friday, arguing that the cable news giant, in an effort to boost faltering ratings, falsely claimed that the voting company had rigged the 2020 election. Now, I would argue that, and this is AP's characterization of it, that it wasn't to boost faltering ratings at the time. They literally were bought into this. Maria Bartiromo's ratings were coming almost solely from the fact that she was pushing this lie, that was what her audience was going to see, because Maria Bartiromo was originally on, the Fox Business Network. She was supposed to be one of the, she was, they're like Christine Romans, on CNN, where they talk about, the markets or bond yields and that kind of stuff. And somehow she got put into this kind of early morning pre-church Sunday, like right-wing audience block that was really important for some reason. That I don't know why that time span worked for them, because obviously, like, the Hannity and Tucker and Laura Ingraham window at night during the week was a big deal. But for some reason, they really captured this sort of Sunday morning before Meet the Press kind of stuff, which was, straight up like a right-wing pocket. And Maria Bartiromo landed right in the middle of it. The lawsuit says the truth matters, lies have consequences. If this case does not rise to the level of defamation by a broadcaster, nothing does. Dominion argues that Fox News, which amplified inaccurate assertions that Dominion altered votes, sold a false story of election fraud in order to serve its own commercial purposes, severely injuring Dominion in the process. I mean, materially, that's just true across the board. We have, and this is the amazing part, in the last election, we had somewhere in the order of 94 to 96% paper trail in our elections. Like, traceable paper record. We had 85% in 2016. And one of the reasons was the rise of people asking for a paper trail in their voting. But I mean, obviously, mail-in votes had a huge process, and it was a huge part of that, right? And that increased the number. But the Dominion machines, insofar as I know, and I'm curious if anybody knows better, because I haven't found anything, are all paper trail related machines. The Dominion machines are specifically, used by areas of the country that want to make sure that there's a paper trail. And the ES&S machines, which are used in Texas and Kentucky and Florida, Texas rejected the Dominion machines outright, largely because of, it would seem, that whole paper trail part. That they prefer a voting system that is, more indicative of, it was there a second ago digitally. Now it's gone. For anybody who watched Mike Lindell's Absolute Proof movie, the first expert he has on in the first half hour does nothing but talk about how the biggest fraud in the country is happening in the Texas election systems, and that they send their votes to Spain and back and all this kind of lunacy. But at one point, Mike Lindell goes,
sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my argument was, so if I'm to believe Mike Lindell's Absolute Proof, Biden won Texas then, I suppose. And that as did Beto O'Rourke, because he says it's been going on for years. Clearly they're gaming the system, right? You would guess that if it's rigged, you would suspect that the person who wins is the one who rigged it or is involved in the rigging, in theory. You'd think. So anyways, we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's a House Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk, live from Alameda, California today, because I'm doing shows there tonight. AlamedaComedy.com. They're live streaming the shows. It's pretty fun.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And we can buy a ticket to that live stream.
They're not allowed to be offensive, unfortunately.
That's just for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fighting for Iowa values. Fighting for Iowa values.
What was he going to say?
He was saying fighting for Iowa values.
Oh, okay.
Fighting for Iowa values. They don't like the gas.
Sorry.
They don't like the gas.
All right. There you go. That's just to make Johnny happy.
It really does.
Yeah.
They don't like the
GOP's
gas.
march to here you go. GOP's march to Christian fascism with guns started decades ago. Reagan made government enemy. Trump made the press the enemy. Connell packed the courts. Next step, install God King with fake unfair election. You're not wrong in that regard. There is, they definitely have a strategy because getting elected on the merits ain't it.
Apparently not.
I call Maria sloppy top because she always has this weird like slobber ring around her mouth when she's talking.
Ew.
Ew.
Oh, I thought that was you, Hal.
No, somebody wrote that in the chat. Yeah, so that was GOP installed Thomas in the Supreme Court as an agent for Christian white supremacy. GOP installed Amy Coney Barrett as an agent for Christian male supremacy. Please, Biden fix courts. Well, the question will be is that, do we have a Supreme Court justice for every circuit, which I think would be smart. I mean, there's a danger of like, if you just keep filling it up, it becomes like another Senate that effectively then the march becomes, do we just fill the court like a lifelong Senate, which will be the goal. And the argument is thank you. Isn't it already?
That's amazing. How did you do that? That's amazing. How did you do that?
So stupid.
He just said so many things that can be punctuated on either side.
So over the course of, looking at this Dominion suit and looking at what seems to be the strategy going forward for the Republican Party, the limitations of and the attacks on voting, in many ways has worked very well for them. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest. Like I said, I've been, on my live stream twice. I've done the long form and the short form, where I've broken down Mike Lindell's absolute proof, which is beyond simply a joke. It is embarrassing and silly and tiring. It would be funny if it was shorter in a lot of ways because it's almost an SNL sketch on its own, but it drags. It's
if you've ever tried to write a sketch, the hardest thing is how to get out of it.
That's right. How to end it. And they seem to, in many ways, that's lost on them horribly. Like they have no way of knowing when people have stopped listening or tuned out. And in many ways, because of the nature of the lie that they're pushing, the repetition and boredom aspect of it gives the illusion that it is somehow, it is legitimate simply because life is boring. So if I make this boring enough, maybe that's because it's just everywhere. It's so permeate. You know what I mean? What's more boring than stuff that's all around you? So if I make these egregious lies boring and drag and all this stuff, then that's indicative in many ways psychologically of the permeateness of it, of it being around us and everywhere. Oh God, we're surrounded by the deep state. We're surrounded by, this conspiracy to turn the elections just for, towards Democrats so that socialism, yabba, yabba, yabba. So we will have to watch this over the next little bit. Now, my own personal belief about the Georgia laws is that many of them are unconstitutional. And I and many of my friends on Twitter, including John Henson, fellow former TalkSoup host, have committed to, in the next election cycle, handing out water to people in line in Georgia and snacks so that, to test that law. Because the irony that the Republican Party is effectively trying to cancel water. All this talk about cancel culture, about 6 Dr. Seuss books that the Dr. Seuss organization that oversees the publication of all the books that have been removed because they were not selling because of their racial insensitivity, right? Or the old methods about like just them being kind of outdated in terms of conversation or uncomfortable because of how they, what was normal back then is not normal now. And in many ways, like the removal of a very uncomfortably named Agatha Christie book, when all of her other books are still available, and of course, John's cat has a lot to say on that subject as a big fan of
mystery. She's a big Agatha Christie person.
Yeah, absolutely. But over the course of their complaints about cancel culture, what they're And at the same time, they are trying to cancel voting, not just the votes of other people, but literally voting as a prospect for large groups of people, overriding the Secretary of State. And by the way, if Georgia wants to override the Secretary of State with their setup and all that, and go in and take over election boards if anything's fraudulent or whatever, knock yourself out. Because the problem that they're going to run up against is that, like every other time we've looked into any of this stuff, when the fraud does happen, it happens in Republican districts by Republican voters. And if they're confronted with that enough times over these election cycles, that is something they're going to have to carry around, every time the press discusses anything with them. The issue that we have more than any other in terms of these laws in particular and the ability for people to vote is the eliminations of machines, the inability for people to make sure that, the lines aren't long in impoverished areas or in minority areas or both. And lines are short and you have multiple machines in rich white areas, especially in a state like Georgia, which is a violation of people's civil rights. There is grounds, and unfortunately it would be after a cycle of the election, and they believe that this would be their cycle where they could take back. Now, they're not going to be able to take back their the senatorial seats in the next election. But in terms of House representation or whatever, or local elections where they maintain this control, they believe they will be able to manipulate that and then grow over a 10 to 12 year plan, a thing to turn Georgia red again by tourniqueting the black areas from the white areas, and that the white vote will increasingly, lean Republican. The problem I think they have is that I don't think that's necessarily true anymore, because there's a little bit of Republicans buying into the Democratic narrative of black people turning the election in Georgia, for example, whereas they are materially the tipping point of a lot of these. What's under them, because you're talking about 6 to 12% of the population, as far as voting populace, you're talking about 6 to 7% of black people, especially in Georgia, you're talking closer to 12% as the tipping point. That under that is an increasingly large group of white voters who are Democratic, who think that now, I used to live in a red state, so why bother? That they now see that their state can turn blue, or at least be purple, or at least their district can have a say, that are actually going out to the polls, that buoy up those black votes and make them the tipping point. Yeah, I understand. That that those black votes wouldn't make a difference if it wasn't for the sea of white and Hispanic votes and Asian votes along with them that share their values, share their desire. You know, that the idea is that, you know, in many ways that that black women are the voice of the Democratic Party, but the volume of voters in the Democratic Party aren't black women by any measure. But the Democratic Party is made up of people who believe black women should be heard. Is one of the main distinctions between the Democrats and the Republicans. And so in states like Georgia, what Kemp and others will find over time is that while they're trying to, they think, well, you can just stop this area from voting. What they're doing is inspiring people in the other areas to react to that in a way that is ethical and moral and responsible and go, that's wrong. Even if I don't share 100% the political leanings of that group, they deserve to be heard. And that's what's going to bite them in the ass eventually. That will be a you know, the issue is how many election cycles do they get through before it does? That's the concern, because the entrenchment and being able to get in there and basically buttress up firewalls against, you know, anybody, you know, making attacks on these new rules changes, these law changes, or simply the denial of voting machines, the denial of technology, the denial of water in certain districts over others. By the way, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that you can hand out water to people before they get in line. You know, like that you can be standing there and go, thinking about getting in line? Yeah, I can't give it to you once you're in line, but I can point to where it is. Yeah. We're not handing it out, but there's a cooler.
What would enforcing that look like? Just
exactly
slapping water out of people's hands.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. And I think a lot of activists, especially you know, myself included, are looking forward to that battle. Are looking forward to that, to making a stand around that.
The police going, oh no.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to enforce this.
Yeah. Well, and also, you know, it is. And I think, and Biden said this when he went out in his press gaggle on the way to Marine One, was that's how you can tell this is not about, you know, voting integrity. That was, and the fact that they were that maniacal about adding that part to it, that you can't hand out water and snacks when people are standing in line for a long time. The fact that they went there proves that this is not about fake people voting. You're not handing out water to people that don't exist. You're not giving snacks to people who aren't waiting in a long line, who are, you know, more and more, if your idea is that you have to have people show up, people need to vote. This was what we heard from the Republicans the entire election cycle. Remember that?
In person.
Vote in person, right? And then you make sure that voting in person is incredibly painful.
Yep.
For anybody that might vote for the other side. That's the strategy. That is 100% their strategy this time around. You know, is to make it near impossible. They're not going to give you the best machines. You're going to stand in line, and machines are going to continually break down, and they're going to only send the worst ones. They're going to. I mean, they all sit in the Secretary of State's under the Secretary of State's care until they're used. You know, and if you're going to, you know, get into the conspiratorial world of it, if we increasingly see, you know, districts where you have a majority of minority voters that are continually denied resources to make voting possible, or you must show an ID, but the state doesn't provide one for you. So effectively there's a poll tax, or they can, you have to re-up it, and they, you know, here's one of the tricks, which of course, state IDs and driver's licenses, you narrow when people can get them. You can't get one renewed for a cycle, and they all expire right before each election, like a month or two before, so that you end up where everybody, if you can't get yours re-upped, you're using a photo ID that has a picture of you that's absolutely registered, and it's expired, even though you're still you. You haven't changed any aspect of yourself, but because they won't allow you to re-up it, you're suddenly denied the ability to vote. It's horrifying and absolutely in line with the only way they think they can win. We'll be back right after this. This is the House Parts Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. WCPT820.com is the website. And of course, the House Parts Radio podcast, Mega Worldwide, is available on the Sexy Liberal Network, sexyliberal.com. And April 10th, the 10th year anniversary of the very first Sexy Liberal live show. We're doing a digital live show with some of the people who've been with us through the years, new material and footage of some of the old shows. It's going to be crazy. We'll be back right after this. There it is. Whoops. Saw a meme about how Georgia voting BS this morning. That is too perfect. Going to share it with you. It's Portland. You can tweet it to me, Shell. Thank you. I think this is the one. Where am I here? Worry about these laws being upheld by, Carl saying, I worry about these laws being upheld by originalist judges under Article 2, Section 1. State legislatures may appoint in such a manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. Yeah, they can use whatever system they want to do it. It does not say that the electors themselves can go against what the actual voters say. They can pick the voters. I mean, they can throw them at a dartboard. But if it's shown that those electors go against the actual voters, whereas in the originalist view, you might be able to push legally, they might be able to put, well, the elector can vote for whoever they want. Conscientious, objection to it, as it were. Thank you. I look forward to them trying that, is what I'm saying. I absolutely think that it will fail long term. The question is that, how we get, a Josh Hawley elected, right? He's back.
Flora made it sound like someone was knocking on the door.
That's right. I understand. Welcome back. So, we and it is kind of the happy ending in that we're gonna be looking down the barrel of a discussion about this infrastructure bill that's going to come up. That is the next thing that the Biden administration is going to put forward. Immigration will follow thereafter, but you're going to watch as this issue there's going to be a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth about immigration as we deal with the people who normally come this time of year mixed with the people who've been waiting, and the fact that we are dealing with a lot of these unaccompanied minors. Even saw a guy who's a direct activist who works in these facilities talking about how today that a lot of the unaccompanied minors that we're experiencing aren't really unaccompanied. Their families are there as well. They just sent their kid across because they know the kid can get in and they'll try and get in later, but they're worried about feeding their child. They're not worried about themselves. So they send their child, over the river and through the desert to try and, protect them during this time. What DHS does, and what the Customs and Border Patrol does, CBP does, is that they talk to the kid, they interview them, they take down their name, they fingerprint them. And in some cases, they blood type them, they test them for COVID, and then they go, "Where are your parents?" And they go, "Well, my mom's already in the country, or my dad and my mom are over." And they'll send caseworkers across the border into Mexico and go, "Is this your child?" And they go, "Yes." And they go, "All right, well, come pick them up." And they give the child back to their parents on the other side of the border. They reunite them, but they're like, you can't just send your kid. That's dangerous. You can't just send your kid by yourself and then, and abdicate responsibility for your child. We'll help you out. We're going to hook you up with some NGOs. We're going to help, if you have an asylum claim, we'll process it, but you can't just dump your kid and run away. That's the vast majority of these kids. That's why the number that you keep hearing, there's 16,000, but there's only 5,600 in that they're holding on to. Well, what happens to the other half? They are processed and sent back to the country they came from or reunited with their parents, and they're not really unaccompanied minors. The Trump administration created unaccompanied minors out of whole cloth. You know, I think it was Laura Ingraham who was saying, you know, these kids came across with their, you know, these unaccompanied minors coming across with their parents, is what she said. Well, they weren't unaccompanied. They were accompanied. And Trump separated them from their parents, making them unaccompanied in that regard. So as much as we hear about that, that will not be the next bill that comes to the, you know, that's coming out. The economy had already started to slow in February due to the lack of stimulus. The new stimulus that's coming out and them talking about, you know, the tour that they're doing around discussing with, you know, with trade groups and voters and the like to get people on board with the stimulus as it's sent out and as it's spent and as people get UI and businesses get new PPP loans and the like. As they put that forward, the next thing that you're really going to see of merit beyond, you know, people putting, you know, gun bills to the floor is going to be a major infrastructure package. And Biden gave a clue this week as to what the strategy was going to be, because they directly talked about that. He goes, I've noticed the most successful presidents, it has a lot to do with the timing of their legislative agenda, more so than the actual stuff they're putting forward. Because you can put forward the most popular thing in the world, but if the public's conscience is on another thing, there's no reason to expect it will pass because there's no pressure. There's also a problem with if whatever the public is focusing on wholly, that you dive right in and try to push something through that doesn't solve it, but is themed with it, you might end up creating a situation where there's bad legislation that gets through and the real solution doesn't happen. And so these quickie versions, which is what the Republicans often try to do, you put there's a comprehensive immigration bill that exists, and it's bipartisan. It would make it across the line with 60 votes if Republicans were voting normally. But there's a big movement on the Republican side to strip out everything but DACA protection or something like that. So they can pat themselves on the back for doing two things, but avoiding the bigger problem. And if you do that and that gets passed, what you end up with is effectively what people will view as a Democratic failure to get bigger legislation done in the name of expediency, and Republicans getting to pretend as if they did something when they really just abdicated the problem entirely. So it's going to be over the next couple of months. The next big push is going to be this infrastructure bill, because it is the second stage of building towards a stronger economy. It will be over time the thing that helps right the bond yield market and all that kind of stuff, because infrastructure bonds and the way you pay for it and the way it will be set up in the budget will increase the value of those things and will raise the interest rate on those things over time, which will have a steadying effect on the economy overall that you have to do after you've dumped all this money in to try and jumpstart the thing so that you don't flood the engine. You want something a little more steady. So you're going to see this kind of follow-up where there's these material on the ground things. And don't be surprised when a couple of bipartisan bills pass with very little fanfare. They have a lot of budgetary overlays that do this exact thing. But the big package, the big infrastructure push, considering that at one point Trump was pushing a $2 trillion infrastructure bill after going for 1.3 at one point, and that being the floated idea, that Biden's coming out with a full $3 trillion price tag, or floating that idea, is that if you roll back and you end up getting 2.2 done, that's more than what Trump was presenting. It's something that Republicans supposedly were going to sign on to. It absolutely falls under budget reconciliation. unlike the $15 minimum wage, which is an entirely different discussion, and is a social bill. Effectively, it's material. At no point does the government pay the other half of people's wage. That's the only way it would fall under budgetary reconciliation, is that it's government spending that makes up the gap in people's salaries. That's why the $15 minimum wage isn't considered under reconciliation. Whereas even the tax bill, which the Republicans pushed through with reconciliation, yes, they got that through, but that deals directly with the budget, because the budget is not just money you put out, it's money you take in. So it qualified under reconciliation in the same way that the rescue package was under reconciliation, because that was government spending. That was government putting money into stuff. The $15 minimum wage isn't going to be that. It's a much bigger fight and may end up being state to state. A lot of states already have it. A lot of big cities within smaller, other states have it. That there's an ongoing fight and an ongoing push, and making it, all the bills presented are strategically over about 4 to 10 years, depending on where they are, 4 to 8 years, lifting it year by year, a little bit, kind of growing it. That's where Arizona is right now. That's why Kristen Sinema, isn't worried about her constituents worrying about a $15 minimum wage, because they're already on track to do it. But it doesn't fit in reconciliation. The infrastructure bill does. And while the Republicans had control of the Senate, there was no point where they were going to allow that to happen. Even if Trump wanted it, wanting it was more valuable politically than getting it. Anytime you're in a situation where wanting something or getting your voters to believe that you can't have it, or you're trying to get it, much like abortion, anti-abortion restrictions, those kind of things, leading your voters along with that stuff is more valuable than actually solving it. You're in, that's troubled waters politically. It means you are literally in the business of scuttling positive movement on stuff, even though you sell the idea that that's the way it should happen. Democrats are not in that situation, not with the infrastructure bill. And like I said, will it be the full $3 trillion as presented? Probably not, because some of those, to get it through reconciliation, some stuff might be pared out. If we're not, as the federal, if the federal government's tax dollars are not paying for the universal pre-K, for example, if that's not a government program, and it's it might, whether it's done, versions of it may be able to be done with a tax break, others with grants to certain areas that are impoverished. If you do it like that, that's budgetary, and you will get that. But if not, it may get pared out into another bill entirely. It may be, you just slap it in the defense bill and know that it has to get passed, those kind of things. But we're looking at a massive infrastructure package that, for all practical purposes, could be $2 trillion and absolutely passed with budget reconciliation sometime, before midsummer, which would, for the sake of the country, for the sake of our economy, for the sake of the health and well-being of rural Americans and the flyover states, would be an extraordinary boon. So I look forward to the fight and the push around that. And it's one of the reasons why you're going to see Republicans at the border clamoring about immigration, because if you start talking about the infrastructure bill, their own voters are going to be upset with them for not supporting it. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Johnny Million. And thank you, Kitty Cat. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Chicago. Absolutely.
Captain's log.
All right. Had to leave him with that. I got to figure out how I do the audio setup. What is that sound? That's very weird. I don't know if that's me, or is that you, or you like, there's like a fluttering noise. I think it's just the digital stuff of that or whatever. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, we made it all the way through the show. Good. Now I can collapse and get some sleep before show. Oops, hold on. I lost you again. I can't hear you because I turned off that. And in the monitor thing, say something. Oh, that's what's weird. Okay. Your audio is all chirpy and strange. Hold on one second. I don't know what that is. Very peculiar. Is it just me that's hearing it like that? Or does he sound like, yeah. So. Johnny. Yeah, it sounds like the Predator. That's right. It's like a weird chipmunk chirping sound that's coming from your microphone. It's not you, Johnny. It's the like I said, it's that weird looping that's happening in the thing. Hold on one second. Let me turn this off real quick. Whoop. And see if I bring him back. If it helps. Come back, you craziness. Can you say something, Johnny? Nope. Oh, that's weird. Okay, I'm going to let you go because the audio is just totally doing something weird. I'll worry about that later. Yeah, it's Trill Speak. You sound like a robot to everybody. Digital alien bird noises. Like, it's crazy. So I'm going to have to work out that part of my road rig over the next little bit. Wish me luck. But thank you guys so much for tuning in today. And sorry about the initial tech issues. I'll get it together. We'll build on this piece by piece because I'm going to be on the road doing Shakespeare. I'll be in Florida for almost 2.5 weeks, in the end of April, beginning of May, to do the show because of rehearsals and all that kind of stuff. And I'll be doing my show from down there. Now I'll have more of a steady rig and setup because it'll be a longer trip. But as I do stand-up weekends where it's like 3 days, I'm going to end up having to bring a version of stuff with me to get, up and online and all that kind of stuff. So I'll work out all these things. The Saturday part is the hardest part. Doing my regular show like this isn't so much a problem. But I'll work it out. We'll get it together. You guys are wonderful. Thank you guys for your patience. And I will see you guys later on. Some of you are going to watch the show tonight. AlamedaComedy.com is the thing where actually I think the live part of it, the actual butts in seats, is sold out, which is very nice. There might be like two tickets left for the early show. I don't know. Anyways, they were talking about it yesterday, but they presume that it's going to be completely sold out, which is nice. But I think that's because people just want to get out and do stuff. I'm not going to take it personally quite yet. But anyways, I will see you guys on the regular show on Monday. I'll be back home. You guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.